as key drivers and collaborative agents of innovation and change. In line with this imperative for universities to lead in creating change, tonight's debate, the Zondo Commission report, What Next for Our Captured State, tackles a topic that has been on most South Africans' minds over the past decade or so. State capture and its effects on every facet of South African life has become one of the most pressing and important problems, if not the dominant problem, facing the country in its democratic history. For more than 3 years, we watched witness after witness peel back the layers on what we've been reading about for years before, a web of alleged state capture that has proved toxic to South Africa's post-apartheid development and stalled the project of drastically and irreversibly improving the lives of the millions of people whose lives have been severely impacted by ongoing effects of centuries of corruption. Corruption pioneered by colonialism, perfect by apartheid leaders, and more recently, seemingly deep-rooted corruption that has taken hold in our current body politic and that has negatively affected many aspects of our lives today. Effects that have been felt most severely and harshly by the most vulnerable people in our society. Let me remind everyone here that there were early warnings of state capture from our independent media. As chairman of the board of Amabungan, the investigative journalism unit, I was witness to the team publishing stories on the nefarious influence of the Guptas through the Gupta email leaks and other stories. Society should have taken heed early on and prevented what is now a cancer. With this shameful history in mind, the recent release of the first 4 parts of the report of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, corruption and fraud in the public sector, with the final report expected later this year, represents a pivotal moment in South Africa. However, what follows in the wake of the reports will determine whether the Commission will restore citizens' faith in our leaders' ability to tackle allegations of corruption and uproot deep-seated corruption. It is with this what now question in mind that we have gathered a mix of leading UP alumni, alumni associates and academics, thought leaders across the fields of law, politics and the economy, so that they might deliver on the role that universities are called upon to play in society, that of constantly reflecting on our striving to build an accountable democratic state and world. I look forward to our panelists' contributions, and I'm sure it will be a robust debate that will hold our leaders and all of us, whether at a university or any institution or position in our society, to account. May this debate provide markers for all of us on the direction to take in continuing to build the society, country, and continent and world we dream of. I thank you for joining us and look forward to engaging with you again soon.
Dear esteemed guests, colleagues, and alumni, as well as our viewers everywhere, good evening. I am Sebenzile Nkambule, and welcome to the LeadUP Alumni Thought Leadership Discussion. I myself am UP alumnus, and I'm certainly grateful to be joined in the company of my guests this evening, who both of them, in fact, are UP alumni, and also our guest who will adopt this evening, in fact, who isn't UP alumni. As Professor Coupe introduced this evening's discussion, the topic is the Zondo Commission. What's next for our captured state? For the next little under an hour, we plan to speak about the legal processes that are likely to unfold in the wake of the state capture report. What is the capacity of the justice system to handle such processes, the actions that government and political leaders should take to restore public trust, the developmental impact of state capture on an already ailing economy, and of course, what the best moves South Africans can make to recover economically and attract investment, or other means of fast-tracking development. It's a hot topic, it's a big one, and I look forward to engaging you this evening. Of course, this event is brought to you by the University of Pretoria's Alumni Relations Office, and the panelists who join us, and I already mentioned, are nearly all UP alumni. And let me not waste any more time and introduce them. Minister Ronald Lamula, who is to my immediate left, is a two-time UP alumnus and South Africa's Minister of Justice and Correctional Services. Virtually, we are joined by Lord Peter Hain, who's a former UK Cabinet Minister and renowned anti-apartheid activist. We're also joined in person by Dr. Caroline Chisadza, UP alumni and development economist in UP's economics department. We're, of course, meant to be joined by Dr. Mampo Modise. However, Dr. Modise could not join us this evening. Dr. Modise is the Deputy Director General of Public Finance at the National Treasury. Let me remind you also that when you are posting about the event on the various platforms that we have, do use that hashtag LeadUP when posting about the event. To kick us off, Minister, and I'll start with you, let's give you just a few minutes, and I'll do the same with our other panelists, for you to just give us your high-level thoughts on some of the salient legal, moral, and political questions that this almost four-year-long process that we've been on as a country, more than R1 billion of taxpayer funds already spent on this. What are some of the key points that stand out for you, just to kick us off?
Thank you very much, Sebenzile, and to all the participants, physically and virtually, and University for Alumni for this platform. The first thing maybe I want to touch on before I come into the topic that we are in here for today, because it's for the first time I am setting foot at the university since the Stellenbosch incident, is to state that I do think that that incident is a wake-up call for all universities across the country, not to wait for it to happen again in your institution, but to do whatever that is possible to ensure that we do not again witness such incidences of racism in our campuses. And I know that this campus has also been in the past been a subject of such incidents. I hope that your reports and all measures are in place to ensure that you don't wait for the incident to happen. And you also add your voice in the country's cry to build an inclusive society. On the topic at hand, it is indeed a very sad history or dark period in our country that led to the appointment of the Zondo Commission of Inquiry. And I think what led to this kind of a situation, as the Prof has said, is the fact that the country's institutions were hollowed out and could not handle some of the corruption incidences that were happening during that period. And I think one of those instances where there was a public and open process to hollow out the institutions was the dissolution of the then DSO, well known as the Scorpions, because that also led to institutions of government or of the states that are aimed to deal with high level and sophisticated corruption not to be in place, because when you look at the types of crimes that the commission was handling or dealing with, it's highly sophisticated, needing a highly skilled digital forensic, accounting forensic, which sadly the National Prosecuting Authority and the Hawks and most of our forensic institutions did not have such skills to respond to that challenge. Hence, we needed a commission of inquiry. Now we know that there is this, what then must the country do? Obviously, from our side, we had to put aside a budget for these institutions, the NPA and the Hawks, to be able to respond through acquiring of the necessary skills, but also by giving them some legislative cover that will enable them to deal with this kind of difficult or complex matters. And lastly, Cabinet has approved also a civil society structure that will also come up with an action plan that must respond to this going into the future, which must include the whole of society, which I do believe will enable us to prevent, because we have mostly focused on the side that we need to deal with the incidences after it has happened, the consequences, which is a more expensive process and time consuming. And it has to be done. Consequences must visit those that have participated in this project, this grand scale project of corruption and of state capture. But also going forward, we have to deal with the preventative measures. And I think that's where those that are in the accounting field and ethical governance has to come into place so that we don't have to spend lots of money to deal with the consequences. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Dr. Chisadza, I'll come to you. And if you could really just focus on what this project of capture has done to our pursuit of developmental goals, as well as the bigger project of transformation.
Thank you, Sebenzile, and good evening to the Minister and to live audience and to all those listening in, and thank you for inviting me to this conversation. So the implications of corruption on economic development are usually felt more by the ordinary citizen than by the people that are actually implicated in the corruption. And what the corruption that has been revealed in the state capture to date has actually weakened the state's capacity to perform efficiently for its citizens. And this negatively affects progress towards development goals, such as economic growth, addressing unemployment, reducing poverty and inequality, attracting investments, and even strengthening quality of institutions. But what is more of concern is that the state capture has really negatively affected the redistributive capability of the government. So a lot of resources have been diverted from key economic sectors that are productive to parastatals that are not productive due to corrupt activities. And this has limited the availability of resources for service delivery. And what we find is that it left the South African economy vulnerable to shocks such as the COVID pandemic or the KZN floods, where resources were now seriously needed, but then there were no resources available because they had been depleted, because they had been diverted to bail out underperforming entities, right? So what the state capture has done is, right, it worsens an already ailing economy. And this just works to further delay the development progress and the economic transformation. And I think that the state capture poses a really serious threat on the progress that we have already achieved to date in obtaining development in South Africa.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dr. Chisadza. Lord Peter Hain, thank you very much for joining us this evening as well, and welcome to the discussion. The role of the private sector and its complicity in the capture of the state is certainly an aspect that we must not miss as we try and understand what this particular process has meant for the country.
Yes, and thank you very much for inviting me. I'm not an alumni, and it's good to see Ronald again, and also to meet Carolyn and yourself. But I am a Pretoria boy. My childhood was spent in the city. I went to Boys High, and I teach at University's Business School at Gibbs. I want to focus on the prodigious looting, corruption, and money laundering, which has the international dimension, because it would not have been possible without the connivance of Bain and Company, KPMG, McKinsey, SAP, Hogan Lovells, and the banks, HSBC, Standard Chartered, and Baroda Bank. Global corporates were crucial to this whole looting. They obtained sweetheart, fee-clutching state contracts, helping former President Zuma's business associates, the Gupta brothers, to loot the state and move their stolen billions out of South Africa and then sometimes back in undetected. Banks like HSBC, Standard Chartered, and Baroda, with a global footprint, admitted opening their electronic banking channels to the Guptas and their associates to transfer billions of rand through their digital pipelines to less regulated jurisdictions like Dubai and Hong Kong or British overseas territories in the Caribbean, and then to clean the money by mingling it with other funds, so disguising its origins and enabling it to be more easily spent. And these banks, and I hope that this will be a focus for future government policy in South Africa and internationally, these banks should have spotted the suspicious activity much sooner or immediately, secretive transactions to obscure the ownership of accounts, unexplained payments to and from third parties with little or no apparent connection to the underlying transaction, the transfer of funds around shell companies which did not conduct trading and obscured the persons controlling them, and unexplained connections with and the movement of monies between jurisdictions. The global lawyers and accountants also assisted the Guptas to set up complex shell or front companies, hiding their true owners, enabling the money to be moved out of one country to another country where there's low transparency. And that's the case in Dubai and Hong Kong, for example. Dishonest audits left suspicious transactions hidden. Estate agents received laundered money during Gupta property purchases. Global brand names from KPMG to McKinsey, from HSBC to Standard Chartered, all profited, while the Guptas hid their money and spent their stolen funds that could otherwise have been destined for essential South African public services, job creation, or infrastructure, leaving the public finances, as you know better than I do, and as Carolyn has explained, near bankrupted and growth stalled. And given the devastating findings on Bain in the first report of the Zondo Commission, and of course we've had three since, surely it's unacceptable that the company is allowed to operate commercially in the UK, in the USA, or anywhere else in the world, at least until it's repaid the fees estimated at 100 million pounds or 2 billion rand earned from the South African state during the Zuma Gupta years and answered charges in the courts in South Africa as the Zondo Commission recommended. And Bain, and I'll conclude on this point, Bain has had contracts worth over 55 million pounds with the British Cabinet Office alone over the last couple of years, and many more public sector contracts. And I've written to Boris Johnson asking that he suspend all government contracts. They've refused to do so up to now, but I'll do the same for other corporates which have been indicted. But because turn a blind eye governments are also part of the state capture scandal, unless the UK, the US, the Chinese, Indian, and UAE governments, who are the principal ones involved here, cooperate with each other, state capture will happen again, either in South Africa or other countries. Because despite government ministers in Britain saying we have tough anti-money laundering and anti-corruption laws, and on paper they do, international criminals continue to loot money and money launder through London, New York, Hong Kong, Delhi, and Dubai with impunity. And government ministers the world over talk the talk on corruption, but have so far failed to take the necessary tough action against guilty big corporations to stop them enabling it. And without their cross-border cooperation, no country will be emancipated from financial crime, which was estimated by the United Nations to be worth around 5% of global GDP, or $2 trillion each and every year. $2 trillion each and every year. That will continue while governments don't cooperate to stop it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Lord Hayne. Minister, let's segue from the last point from Lord Hayne and talk about, and in fact, quantify just the capacity that exists currently of the justice system to be able to deal with this? We know at the beginning of this process, when the former public protector advocate, or Professor Thuli Madonsela now, initially ordered the institution of the commission, the terms of reference were rather narrow, and we know they've expanded quite a bit throughout at least the process of the commission itself. That, of course, has exacerbated, if we look at the quantum of issues being dealt with, in addition to the other regular day-to-day criminal activity that the justice system needs to have the capacity to deal with. What's possible here in terms of investigations capacity, resourcing the NPA, for example? What sort of measures are in place to ensure that this work can be carried out?
Obviously, we understood the magnitude of the work and the scale. Hence, you will remember at the early stages of the Commission of Inquiry, the President appointed or made a proclamation for the Independent Directorate for Investigation, which is now headed by Advocate Johnson, which was headed by Advocate Kronje. The aim was to build some of the skills needs that I spoke about in terms of forensic investigations, digital forensics. As you'll have heard from Lord Hayne, that this is a type of crime that transcends boundaries. It's highly sophisticated. It needs also the same measure of sophistication. Hence, even in the current financial year, we have added about 1.1 billion rands to the budget of the NPA, which will be solely focused on the work that the NPA need to do on anti-corruption measures, including to respond to some of the recruitment in terms of the skills, which I do believe will enable them to be able to respond to these matters. But the scale of this will still need the skills in the private sector, because you will not be able to build that skills or groom that skill within 6 months within the institutions of the state. Hence, you will still need the hands of them in the private sector, where there is ready-made skill that must come in and help these institutions. And obviously, the leg of investigation, as you are aware, in terms of by law, it's a leg that also resides with the Hawks, the South African Police Service. So the need for that collaboration between the two institutions, it's what has been emphasized, that they need to collaborate and work very closely to deal with this type of matters. It's not an investigation where a good has been stolen, where an investigator must go for 6 months and then come back to give a report. This is a type of investigation where it must be prosecutorial-led, it must be done with the eye of what will happen in the courts. And I think the difficulties that these institutions are facing, you are clearly apparent on them. For example, the Stenhoff matter, which you can see is highly sophisticated, also transcend boundaries. Even chartered accountants get confused of exactly what happened with the Stenhoff. They can't tell you. I mean, the chairperson of the board was a well-experienced accountant. There were lots of accountants. It took them years to understand. And even when you read the report of PwC, they are still not really very clear as to what exactly happened. So those are technicalities that the institutions must be built to respond to because of the sophisticated nature of the current global financial markets.
Dr. Chizata, the minister is talking about bringing in the private sector. We saw just from the 4 reports in the various volumes there how ethical and professional standards were just disregarded, removed completely from SOEs. And you're saying to people with these skills, come in and help us in this fight. I imagine many professionals are saying, I'm not sure if this is the place where I want to play. But these are very much the skills that we need for this. What does this mean again for this long journey that we continue to be on in trying again to peel off the layers of large scale and very sophisticated forms of crime?
I'll speak from an economist's point of view, right? Firstly, removing ethical and professional standards, I would definitely advise us against that for our state-owned enterprises. But what I want to bring out is that what the state capture did was it highlighted the weaknesses in the public procurement systems and how the procurement in SOEs or other private companies that Lord Hayne spoke about, how they were used as mechanisms for rent-seeking activities, right? And this just continues to affect the development progress in South Africa. So removing ethics and professional standards, or it's going to affect how the economy operates, and it will just negatively impact on the performance of companies in South Africa. So I would advise against that, but I definitely do commend the justice system and what they're trying to do to try and resolve, or try and find how to resolve and how to help the economy recover from this state capture.
And let me just follow up on that about systems needing to be tightened. You can have the best systems in the world. If you have the wrong people there, you have people cutting corners and making a mess of things, as we've seen.
Exactly. And what the state capture has shown is that it's actually undermined the government's position as the primary channel for economic transformation. So like right now, citizens are sitting and saying, so who do we turn to now, for guidance in the economy? If we can't trust our own government, who do we turn to for protection?
Lord Hayne, let me come back to you, and let's perhaps just speak again around the question of accountability. How far should errant multinationals, errant directors of boards, corrupt professionals go to do right by the people of South Africa? So is a McKinsey, for example, paying back the money, is that enough? Is that them going far enough to do right by the people of South Africa?
Well, first of all, I'm happy to be called Peter, by the way. I am a Pretoria boy after all. No, I don't think it's enough, because I don't think fundamentally these organizations have changed, these big companies. It took two to tango. It took not just corrupt political leadership at the top of the state and then business cronies in the case of the Gupta brothers, but all the contracts and procurement of tenders and so on that went from SOEs like Eskom and the rest. That was all private companies, the consultancies, the lawyers, and the auditors, the big corporate household names like KPMG and McKinsey and so on. They were the ones that enabled it. The Zumas and the Guptas and their cronies could not have done it on their own. And so I don't think it's enough just to pay back and to apologize. And Hogan Lovells, the international law firm, has not apologized or even acknowledged its role in the South African Revenue Service, a whole scandal with the head, Moyane, and his deputy. They whitewashed the whole report there, and they've still not admitted it publicly. So I don't just think it's a question of the fees being changed. I think they've got to reform. For example, if I just give you a practical example, when I gave evidence to the Zondo Commission in November 2019, as you'll be aware, the practice of the Commission is to ask for written evidence, and I submitted a 10,000-word written evidence, and then they send it to the parties that the evidence names for their comments. Standard Chartered came back and said they took exception to me criticizing them, and said that, they were bound by, their argument was it's nothing to do with their Johannesburg branch of Standard Chartered Bank, that the money which they admitted left by the billion to their Dubai branch because their Dubai branch was nothing to do with them. So here they are saying Johannesburg, the South African end of Standard Chartered, despite it being the same global corporate with the same digital financial pipelines through which the laundered money flowed, that they couldn't be blamed for what happened in Dubai. And so I think there's a sense of denial and unwillingness to confront. And I found the same with HSBC when they came to see me in London complaining about me using parliamentary privilege to name them. And suddenly the story had gone onto the front page of the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal, these global newspapers. It wasn't a South African story anymore. And they were very upset about it because their global reputation was threatened. And they said, well, you know, we're bound by client confidentiality. I said, you know what happened to the money. You can track it. And yet they refused to do so.
Just to advise our audience, I will be coming to you for questions in just a moment. So ready yourselves, and I already see online we have several. So we'll wrap up this last one quickly, and Minister, I'll come back to you. Dr. Chisadza mentioned this earlier about the impact on the people of this country. How does your government restore public trust? Right. Just given where we are at this point, we can even perhaps, if you will, reflect broadly on the impact that this has had on brand South Africa and how the global community views us. How do you restore that trust? That's for you, Minister.
I thought you said you're going to doctor. Oh, okay.
I can answer.
No, thank you. I think the first thing is that it should be a collaborative effort with the government and civil society. It should not just be left to government to deal with these issues that relate to corruption and also the various facets of government services. There must be accountability. Government must be held to account. Government must obviously play its role in terms of the procurement processes, particularly the preventative measures where I do think the AG and the qualified and ethical accountants could help in terms of the preventative measures so that it does not happen. But also the public and the private sector has got a bigger role to play because they pay the bribe. They are the one who finance some of this grand-scale corruption. When you look at the monies involved, particularly from the huge multilateral companies, it's not small businesses. It's huge conglomerates across the globe. Hence, it is a difficult task for us to follow up, to deal with. You have to engage. It's dealing with corruption at that scale. It's an international relations matter, where you have to engage with the states of the UAE, Hong Kong, the United States of America, the Great Britain, and all those. And in some instances, they do not cooperate because some of the states, they need these financial outflows into their countries. The illicit finance do help them in terms of their economies. And they are worried that if they cooperate, it might scare off other people who might come with this kind of investment. So that is the terrain within which we operate in. And I do think that with the cooperation of the South African private sector and civil society, we can be able to restore confidence in the procurement system. But also there must be consequences for those that are found to have benefited in the scheme. And I think the Zondo report, it's a turning point in that regard. And the processes that the ID is embarking upon to charge people. And I do think that when we see consequences, people going to jail, people paying back the money, and other relevant consequences as blacklisting of the companies, the message will be clear to society, and that will help to bring accountability and enhance the trust of the public to the state.
Dr. Chisaza, on the same, is that a good enough answer in your view to say, you know, it's not just us as government, everybody else needs to come to the party, we all need to play our part, and that's how we restore trust? Is that good enough?
So I agree with what the minister said, but at the same time, I also want to just add that we also need more effective laws to protect whistleblowers, because these are people that come forward to report corrupt activities, and yet we've seen that some whistleblowers get threatened or even attacked. So we definitely, yes, so I agree, while I agree with the minister that it's not only the government but also civil society and us, the public, that also need to play a role in identifying these corrupt elements, but we do also need really strict laws to protect our whistleblowers that come forward. And also we need to have thorough background checks on people who want to hold public office positions, so that we avoid criminal elements creeping into the public sphere. So we need to have these thorough background checks as well. And I totally agree with what the minister said. Active enforcement is very important to show transparency and accountability, so that the global community can see that South Africa is serious, our institutions are strong, no one is above the law, and that it's a safe country for both local and international investors to invest in South Africa. That's the image we need to portray. And right now, if I tell you, a recent global competitiveness report by the World Economic Forum, I think it's the 2021, it actually ranks South Africa as the lowest in a global group of countries for transparency in securing public contracts. And that's perceptions of the international community that, oh, well, in South Africa, it's quite common for companies to solicit, to have, to make undocumented extra payments or bribes in order to be awarded public licenses or contracts. But, you know, and that's the image we are portraying with this whole state capture report, because it's out there, right? And what's being peeled back and shown is, again, that there was so much corruption taking place in the procurement processes, people being awarded by association, not by reward, the tenders. So we really, really need to show, to be transparent and accountable, and to really show that we are serious in dealing with corruption. Set a precedent that corruption will not be tolerated in South Africa.
Remember to use the hashtag LeadUP as you engage the conversation. Before I come to the audience in person, and I'll scan the room for some of those questions. Here's one that has come in online, and Minister, I'm going to ask you to take it first, and then I'll throw it to Lord Hayne in a moment. This question says, Gupta's capture is just a drop in the ocean. Have you brought apartheid looting to account, and have you dealt with the Rupert's capture and others, asks this person here online. Minister?
No, I think that is the same mentality that led to the unreasonable broadening of the terms of reference of the Zondo Commission. There is evidence that was brought by the former public protector that led to the commission of inquiry. That is what must be investigated. So if there is any other corruption, it must be dealt with on its own merits and demerits. The culture of whataboutism is not going to help us. If there is any corruption that the person knows about the Ruperts, let them bring it forward. Let the institution investigate that corruption. Let it be dealt with as corruption. And it must be done the same way that we have handled the Gupta corruption. If there is corruption by any other South African, let the evidence be brought forward. It does not matter the color of their skin. And I think the institutions also approach that corruption in the same way. When you look at the Tongati case, it doesn't matter whether it's old white males or it's a white woman. The institutions and the law must be blind. It must be attended to as per the evidence that is available. So if there's evidence, let's not bring conspiracy. Let's bring evidence. Let's deal with the evidence, and the institution must deal with the evidence. There is no counter that was built on conspiracy.
Thank you, Minister. Lord Haynes, same one for you, and perhaps if you could speak to just how the broadening of the terms, if you will, complicated matters, and still you have people who are saying, but we haven't gone far enough. Should we continue to do so to truly understand the depth and the scale of corruption in this country?
Well, corruption is universal, but South Africa's had a particularly bad dose of it, especially during the Zuma decade. But it's still going on. My view is, having got embroiled in all of this and being asked to expose it under parliamentary privilege in the House of Lords, is that the problem now is action, rather than, more and more inquiries. I'm not opposed to exposing anything else that's wrong, and Minister Lamola has expressed that very well. If the evidence is there, let's look at it. But what we need now is action. We need action, and I focused on the international level of governments cooperating, because if they don't do that, all the inquiries in the world will not recover the Gupta money, and will not stop it happening again. We need action from the banks. For example, they need to reform their internal practices, and I think the South African government should agree with the British government and the US government and European governments and the Chinese and right across the world, because unless you do it internationally, it's not going to be possible to enforce it. That bank managers have to take personal responsibility. If they overlook money laundering, then they should pay a penalty, either to be brought to justice themselves, or suffer to be dismissed through regulations. And the same must go for the auditors and so on. There's too much passing the buck here. So I think the problem is we haven't seen enough prosecutions. We haven't seen enough international coordination to try and get the money back. I mean, Dubai has an extradition treaty with South Africa. I think India does too, where the Guptas mainly live, though they have a property in Dubai which has been purchased from the Lucid money. So what is actually happening? I mean, the Baroda Bank is part owned by the Indian State Bank. So where's the accountability from the Indian government? So that's where my focus has been.
To the room.
Just one, yeah, China, is responsible for Hong Kong. Yet billions went through Hong Kong. What is the Chinese government doing? What is the South African government? Are they talking to Beijing? Are they talking to Delhi? Are they talking to London? Talking to Washington and the rest about what they can do?
Thank you, Lord Hay. Looking at the room, are there any questions? There's one over there, and I'll go online again. I know there's another one there, but I'll start with the gentleman there in the middle, please, with the question. There's another online as well. Do keep them coming, and I'll try to move them or move with them very quickly. We've got a mic. Please briefly introduce yourself and ask.
My name is Alberto Skuman. I'm from the World Bank. Let me first thank you for all our panelists for taking the time to speak to us tonight. I have two questions for the Honourable Minister. In your opening remarks, you mentioned the formation of a civil society structure to come up with an action plan. Is this something that you can elaborate on? Who will be involved in this? What is the vision for this group? And my second question is around the role of the private sector in supporting the response to state capture. So there have been discussions before around using private law firms to support the NPA. And has there been any progress on public-private partnership agreements with any law firms that you can share with us to help support the NPA's work in prosecuting state capture? Thank you.
The Minister thinks, is there another? Okay, right here, and then we'll come this side.
Thank you so much. My name is Amon, and I'm a UP alumni. Maybe Dr. Caroline will be the relevant person to answer this question, but any of the panelists can take it. I just would like to know from you, you've, I think, explained quite clearly the extent of or the impact of corruption on the economy, that it was not really temporary, but it really affected the structures of the economy. Are you confident that the economy of the country will be able to fully recover from this kind of corruption? I'm saying this because of what you mentioned regarding the competitiveness index. That is not only for the economy, but that is also happening in the mining sector. There have been talks or complaints in the past from the Mineral Council about confidence, about legislative and regulatory uncertainty in the sector, and that is partly because of corruption. We have seen a lot of skill flight related to that. So given the extent of this impact, I just would like to know from you, do you think, or are you confident that there will be a day where we will fully recover from the impact of corruption?
Thank you for that question. Folks, we are pressed for time. I'll squeeze one in, but I know the mic still needs to get in, get to the other side of the room. Minister, there's another one for you, so perhaps if you just tackle those two questions we started with, as well as this one that is coming online. And the question is, Minister, are there measures in place that will lead to the arrest and prosecution of ministers and leadership in South Africa and abroad?
Thank you. The first one in relation to the National Anti-Corruption Strategy. Yes, there was an advert, I think, late last year or early this year, calling for South Africans, including civil society, academia, and everyone who wants to participate in the National Anti-Corruption Council. That will obviously advise government on policy measures, including institutions that could be used to respond to corruption, including the Zondo Commission of Inquiry. And I think you can find that in the website of the presidency. I can no longer remember the second question.
So this, the second question was around public-private partnerships.
Oh, yes. I think what we have seen is that the NPA has, in terms of Section 38 of the National Prosecuting Act, requested my approval for senior practitioners that they believe have got expertise on matters that they are handling, on corruption matters, some of them from the Zondo Commission and some coming from the ID, which has been approved. And they are still in engagement with the law firms, what mechanisms can be used for some of the law firms that may want some kind of a donation in kind in terms of the skills that the law firms have, or some of the forensic firms in terms of the skills that they have, some kind of what measures can we be able to use in terms of donation in kind. And for this, we are engaged in engagement with the National Treasury to use the mechanisms to enable us to do it in a manner that will insulate the NPA. As you are aware, they are supposed to be independent, and whoever comes into the fold of the NPA to deal with any matter must be seen or must be within that prescript of independence. And on the last one, whether measures are there to prosecute the ministers and leaders is, as I've said, the law must be blind. Anyone, whether he's a former minister or is a current serving minister or is an ordinary South African, the law must deal with them the same way. So the NPA Act says they must prosecute without fear, favor, or prejudice. And that is what they're expected to do in terms of the Act and in terms of the Constitution of the country.
Dr. Chisadza, just don't lose your thoughts on the question asked about the recovery of the economy. Let me take the last question then we'll get closing comments.
My name is Jacqueline Kutzer. I'm an international trade advisor. I was also a former diplomat and worked at the energy regulator. Just 2 quick points. The perception abroad is always that African countries are corrupt, African countries are immoral, unethical, all this kind of nonsense. But as has been exposed tonight, the majority of these things are usually because international companies, and particularly Western companies, are complicit, are the driving force even in some instances. How do we get the Western countries to take responsibility and to stop this hypocrisy, so we can stop this absolute hypocrisy that we've got in the world, where Africa is always, it's corrupt and we're the ones at fault, when most of the time it's actually the international companies. I mean, if we look at the 2007-2008 financial crisis, that was also the major banks who had a lot of illegal activities they were involved in, immoral activities as well. And then, sorry, my second point, I'll be very quick. How do we fix South Africa? This is to all the panelists. That is my biggest concern. How do we actually take our country and fix it? Because the problem is not what the Zondo Commission pointed out. The problem is so much bigger. At this stage, most of our government departments are non-functional. I won't even talk about Home Affairs. I mean, that has always been a non-functional entity. I mean, you enter the country, 5 seconds later, you've got a South African passport, ID, driver's license, the works. Our foreign ministry at this stage is one of the biggest jokes in the world. The other diplomats are laughing at us at the way that our diplomats behave. They go on a posting abroad, they do nothing there. We've got problems now with trade attaches, and this is not a new problem. This has at least been since 2000. We've got trade attaches sitting there doing nothing. They are supposed to be helping us to increase trade to other countries. You ask them for their assistance, and it's like, well, we're not really going to do it, and they give you all these bureaucratic measures, which is not their job to do. I mean, I worked in, unfortunately, God forgive me for that, I worked in DTI for a year. The corruption there is so endemic and systemic that it is ridiculous. For people to get promoted, especially in the section where I was, you had to pay your chief director X% of your salary every single month. I mean, okay,
please,
sorry.
just in the
interest
of time. The interest of time. Lord Hayne, I'm coming to you. You were nodding fiercely. Dr. Chisadza, you had a question about the recovery of the economy. We'll use this as well as your parting shot. Go ahead.
So in short, yes, I believe that the South African economy can recover from this. The question is, how long will it take? And that's where all the things we discussed today will start to play, well, factors in, right? We need to recover the costs of the state capture from the people that are implicated. We need to take active enforcement to ensure that the people implicated are brought to justice and held accountable. And at the same time, we still need to concentrate on other growth-promoting factors within South Africa, not only corruption, right? Corruption is part of the issue that is affecting how the economy is operating. But there are other issues that we also need to deal with, right, that work in tandem with fixing the economy. So we still need to address the inequalities that we find in South Africa. We still need to address unemployment. We still need to address how we're going to continue attracting investments or public sector investment, right? So by us dealing with the issue of the state capture, it will have these spillover effects on these other issues as well that we need to deal with. So in essence, yes, I'm an optimist. So I really do believe that the economy can recover. It's just how long it will take us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chisadza, for your comments. Lord Hayne, let's get your just responses to the final questions and also a parting shot from you. Are you also an eternal optimist?
Yeah, I am, because when I teach at your business school in Gibbs, I just see incredible talent from younger people in South Africa just waiting to burst out and provide the leadership the country needs. And with young ministers like Ronald as well, very able ministers, there's a great future for the country. But I just end up by saying, in a way of danger of repeating, but I agree very much with the point made a little while earlier, that it isn't just an African problem, this, and nor is it, by the way, just a problem of the West. Both the Chinese governments and the Indian governments are just as culpable as the British government and the American governments in this whole state capture scandal, in the sense that they have not enforced anti-money laundering regulations that lie there and they say they believe in, with the purpose and the strength that is needed. So I would like to see the South African government set up a task force involving principally those 4 governments, but others. That's to say the Americans, the British, the Chinese, and the Indians, to begin with, to start really bearing down on these global corporates and saying, yeah, you're welcome to do business in India or Britain or South Africa or America or China or wherever, but you've got to start dealing with this whole problem. And there are steps they could take to enforce anti-money laundering procedures much, much more effectively than has been the case so far. So I wish you all the best in that, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Lord Peter Hain, for your contribution. Minister, a parting shot from you, and perhaps if you could speak to how, in your view, the policy-making space needs to change to fight off corruption and plunder of the state.
No, thank you. I also believe that the economy can recover, and it's in the hands of all of us, both the government and the private sector, through the social compacting that the president spoke to on the ERP. And obviously, with regards to the way forward, it's the organizing of the new architecture of our institutions to respond to corruption. You will remember that the Zondo Commission has spoken about an anti-corruption in procurement kind of a Chapter 9 institution. And we have got an independent investigative directorate, which is looking at the outcomes of the Zondo Commission. We are looking at what will be the best kind of institution to respond to this, so that we do not have another commission of inquiry that is going to be that is going to be worth billions of rands. There must be a permanent institution in the fold, or in the same manner that the now defunct DSO, well known as the Scorpion, that will be able to efficiently deal with corruption on a day-to-day basis, just like how the Commission was able to unearth and deal with this kind of matters. And I do believe that when there are consequences seen in the public and when there is action, the situation will turn around.
Thank you very much, Minister. I already spoiled the surprise that there's a cocktail reception outside when we're done here. But let me thank you joining us virtually as well. Thank you for your participation and your engagement. Remember, the next LeadUP Alumni Thought Leadership discussion is happening mid-July, on the 20th of July. So do join us for that. Thank you very much to Dr. Caroline Chisadza, Lord Peter Hain, and Minister Ronald Lamola. I am Sebenzile Nkambule. Good evening.